In this video, we're going to use one of my favorite apps. That's right, ZBrush. Now I'm using 2023.1 edition, and this comes as part of the Max on One subscription, which gives you ZBrush, Cinema 4D, and all of the amazing Red Giant software for After Effects and Premiere. So, good stuff, and definitely recommend it. Now, with ZBrush, I could get lost in this program forever. You know, it's one of those programs that you can actually ideate in really easily and fluidly if you're an artist or just curious, and maybe you used to play with Play-Doh as a kid. I mean, it's a similar experience for sure, and very few other apps can compete. ZBrush, man, love it. Now, it's unlike any other 3D application out there. I mean, they do everything completely different. And why is that? Well, because it was created by traditional sculptors, and it's laid out in a way that made sense to them. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be some master traditional sculptor or know much about that field at all. I'm just some guy that loves ZBrush and loves to create. So I'm hoping that in this video you'll learn a thing or two on, you know, how to jump into ZBrush and start making some magic. We're just going to touch on some of the basics, but if you can do this, you'll be amazed at what you can create, just sticking with a few simple tools. Now, as you can see, we've got the ZBrush interface open, and this is the default interface. Haven't changed anything. And if I start to draw on the canvas with my stylus or mouse, you know, it's pressure sensitive. You can see I've got some weird kind of paint stroke looking thing, and it's brownish red and geometric, and I can continue to paint on top, and we've got a build-up going on, and there we go. But guess what? It's not really 3D. Right now, we're in just the draw mode, which is kind of a 2.5D scenario where we're seeing some 3D effects, some shading in here, and some lighting and different things, but it's certainly not what you'd expect when you see things in ZBrush. You know, I can hold down Shift, and that's usually the smooth tool, but it doesn't really have any effect here. It's just doing the same thing. And if I go to click edit, nothing happens because this is not something we can edit. This is just a mess. Now, there may be some reason that you want to create images like this, but for 99.9% of what most people use ZBrush for, this is not it. So to clear our canvas, you can just hit Command N on the Mac or Control N on the PC, and it disappears. So the best way to get started, if you don't know what you want to, sculpt, and you just kind of want to explore a shape, kind of like start with a ball of clay, well, head on up to the light box in the left-hand corner and choose one of these Dynawax spheres here in the middle upper right. So I'll go ahead and double click on the Dynawax 128, and it says, you sure you want to do this? You want to save changes? Nope, because we got nothing we want to save. And then by doing that, it automatically puts us into 3D mode. You can see up here at the upper left, edit is highlighted, which means we are in 3D. And if I click on the canvas somewhere and start to rotate, you can see the floor grid is rotating, as well as the man's head in the top right of the 3D window there. So we know we're in 3D and we're moving around. Now, at this point, I want to change the layout a little bit, and you can totally customize it, and that's, there's lots of great tutorials on that. We're not going to discuss that here, but if you just want to pick something that's already been created, go up here in the upper right. You can see these different boxes, load next user interface. Click through those until you find one that you like. This is my favorite. It's just 2 to the right, and this gives us commonly used brushes at the bottom, as well as some different materials, so we can toggle from the matte cap red wax to skin shade 4 blend, matte cap green, matte cap gray, and so forth. And this isn't permanently changing your 3D model, it's just visualizing it, changing what it looks like for preference, or depending on the lighting or different things, you'll see different things with the different materials. So there we go. So we've got our interface, we've got our ball of clay, if you will, on the screen, and now to navigate, again, you can click outside of the model on the canvas and move around, and that's just going to rotate us around whatever the active model or subtool is. But if you hold down Alt or Option and then click, if you're still holding Alt or Option, you can see we're moving, panning around from side to side, up and down, while keeping your mouse or stylus engaged. If you let go of Alt or Option, then you'll zoom in or out, truck in, truck out, however you want to say it, to the object. And so basically you can do anything you want with that one keyboard button, Alt or Option. So hold down Alt, move it around, hold down Alt, keep the mouse or stylus engaged, let go, zoom in, zoom out, or to rotate around, just click anywhere without holding down Alt or Option. So that's how we're moving around. And next up is these different tools down at the bottom. And literally, these are some of the only brushes I use primarily. I mean, there's some special kind of brushes towards the end, or, I mean, I guess there's 1 or 2 others, but for just Z sketching, if you will, sketching in ZBrush, these are great. So if I click on Move, and you can see the size of my active area of the brush. You can see it there, it's in red. If I hold down spacebar, I'll get this little menu will fly up, and I can change the draw size. Then there's the focal shift below that that you can play with. I like to make it fairly big to begin with. You can see it's in mirror mode, because on the left hand side there's a little dot showing that it is mirrored on the x-axis. If you wanted to turn mirror off, you just hit X and it's gone. You want to turn it back on for the x-axis, hit X again. And that's most of the time what you're going to want to be in. So I'm not sure what I'm creating here. Sometimes I'll just play around with the piece of clay, if you will, move it around until it starts to become something. And I'm a character guy. I like to create aliens, animals, monsters, people, humans, which are people. And so we'll start off with a head, shall we? And just with the move brush, I'm getting some interesting shapes going. So continue to click around, pulling out a nose, using my Alt or Option button to move around and rotate and see the model in different positions. Oh yes. And initially, you know, it's going to take a little bit before you're going to see anything besides just a standard human looking head. You're not sure this person is a man, a woman, an alien, a monster. Okay. And at this point, that grid, the floor, is kind of bothering me. So I'll go over to the right, click floor, it's gone. Now I don't have to worry about that visual. And I'm losing a little bit of detail with this. The shadows aren't as harsh and what have you. So blend will give you some really sharp shadows and highlights. Or the red wax is nice to kind of get a hint at what the underlying geometry looks like. So just whatever you want. Pick matte cap, green, clay. That feels realistic. So here we are, we've gotten to this point. And there are fancy ways to do things, and there are new beginner ways, explorative ways to do things, and that's what we're focused on today. Okay? So we want to stick with the minimal amount of brushes and keyboard shortcuts and all that jazz. So let's kind of pull out a neck, and things are going to get a little sloppy potentially. We're pulling the geometry past its comfort level. You can see it's starting to stretch over here. You can see it better if you turn on poly lines. It's still fine for most things, but in this day and age of Dynamesh, we are golden. We don't have to worry about it. Back in the beginning, it used to be, okay, go create a base mesh in a different application, you know, Maya, Moto, Cinema 4D, Blender, whatever, bring that in here and then sculpt on top of it. And so it was rare that, you know, you could get anything real professional just directly out of ZBrush, because the polygon count was going to be crazy, and you'd have to make it so high in order to accommodate all the stretching and pulling you needed to do. But nowadays, I'll keep this poly lines on, and I'll go to geometry over here on the right, scroll up just by clicking and dragging with your stylus, go to Dynamesh. You can see it is active. We're at 128 resolution, so we can try that. And just because it's active, you have to do something. You have to signal to ZBrush that, hey, I'm ready to re-Dynamesh this thing. It's not like Sculptus Pro mode. Sculptress Pro mode. Blah, 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 blah. So, okay, ready to Dynamesh, hold down Control and draw a little box, or a big box, whatever, outside of the model. Boom. Re-Dynameshed at 128 resolution per square inch or something. I'm not sure how it exactly gets that, but now it's consistent grid, not really polyflow, but density throughout the model, which is exactly what we need right now. Okay, and you can still see that it keeps some of that look from the lower poly model. If you hold down Shift as you're brushing on the model, it'll smooth things out. So Shift, that's one of those keyboard shortcuts you want to learn. So I'll find that I keep one finger hovered over the Option button, the other one hovered over Shift as I'm doing this. So super valuable. Okay, I'm just going to smooth, soften some stuff up. What do we want to make here? It's looking masculine, male, so we'll stick with that, but you know, don't necessarily want to just do a human, so let's do some kind of alien, shall we? Okay, we're just focusing on the bust. I may bring it down a little further before this is all said and done, but essentially keeping it in bust mode. Because we're going to bust this thing out, yo. Alright, apologize for all those who just dropped off the video because of my stupid impression or comments or whatever you want to call it. Okay, how do we make this more alien? Let's go pointy head. Yeah, a little cliche, I know. They don't call me Cliche Master Font for nothing. Right now you can see I've got some perspective going on this model. It's actually in dynamic perspective mode, which I'm not exactly sure what that is. But if I turn off perspective, now we're just in orthographic mode, which I think I prefer, at least at this stage. Okay, so let's just start fleshing in some detail. You can go down to the bottom and grab the standard brush. You can keep that, or if you want to get really fancy, click it again. And here's all of our brushes, and I like to use the Damn standard brush, named after Damien. So if you start typing D-A, D-A, come on. Yeah, there it is. Just type D, grab it. And now it's saved that down to the bottom left, the Damn standard brush, in place of the normal standard brush, which if you play with both of them, you'll see why the Damn standard is preferred. Some nice almond-shaped alien eyes. Okay, and this is just to kind of lay things out. I'm not going to stick with these eyes, or yeah, you'll see. You can start throwing in some sharpening, and what you'll see is if you hold down Alt while you sculpt on the model, it'll invert the function of the brush or whatever. So if you're digging in and you hold down Alt, it'll then pull it out. If it's a brush that is additive and pulls out, and then you hold down Shift, it will then be subtractive and take away. So again, another reason to keep that Alt keyboard shortcut handy, because when in doubt, use Alt or Alt. I was trying to rhyme, but it was a poor excuse for a rhyme. So I'm just stumbling into some kind of interesting detail on this alien face, something that I haven't necessarily seen before, and it is starting to definitely feel more alien. And that's why in ZBrush sometimes you're going to discover things that you wouldn't discover anywhere else. You know, you're using symmetry, so you're able to bust things out in half the time, as well as it's just super organic experience. So it's not like some of the other applications that don't have sculpting, and there are several that do, and even Cinema 4D and of course Blender, but I'm sorry, they're just not as intuitive as ZBrush. Now, if you don't have ZBrush, they can be good, you know, especially Blender, but still distant second to ZBrush. Everything they've done in that department has been borrowed from ZBrush, I would say. Okay, interesting. We're getting some interesting shape language in here. It's kind of almost got an aquatic form language going on. A gillish alien that comes from some water planet. Okay. Cool. And at this point, you know, we're pulling and pushing and stretching, so it's time to Dynamesh. So hold down Control, draw a box, boom. And sometimes I'm just rotating around the model, trying to get a feel for what's working, what's not, what's the next step. And at this point, this little damn standard brush, it's great for little details, not so much for the big details. So probably gonna switch over here soon to the clay buildup brush, which is my favorite brush by far. So let's do that now. Clay buildup. What that does is lays down a thick slice of clay right over that area. Hold down Shift, smooth it out. But you can get kind of some sharp edges, and as you're building things up, and get some interesting effects. It's kind of like the move tool in that you can move a lot of material quickly if you have it set to, you know, a big enough size. And I just dig it. Some interesting anatomy going on here with this guy. Now, it helps if it's grounded in the anatomy we're familiar with humans and mammals and reptiles. You know, take cues from all three. And then, you know, this is alien, so you can do some things that aren't necessarily from our world, right? Because this is an otherworldly creation that we got going on up in here. Okay. So there you go. Already I've got an interesting bust going of an alien character, and at this point maybe I do step away from ZBrush and start, you know, ideating with sketches with pen and paper or the iPad and Apple Pencil. Or if you're still feeling like the ideas are coming to you and you think you can push it farther here in ZBrush and don't have to go out of application, that's cool too. Which is what I'm going to do, because this is a tutorial primer on ZBrush. Now we're back with the move tool, pushing and pulling to try to discover some new forms, you know, and it's relatively easy to do this, and you can certainly hit undo if you like. Up here at the top, actually, there's this little bar with this orange slider, which represents your undo history. So I can just drag that back and forth to kind of see my progress. So kind of nice. We'll jump back a certain number of undos really quickly to help you visualize that. If I were to jump back and start sculpting on this, you know, and not be at the last place in the history, it'll warn me. It's like, you sure you want to do this? You're gonna, you know, lose the other stuff you've done. And then you just say, yeah, bro, I'm ready. Let's do this thing. Okay, we can do this, yo. So I'm actually really liking this character at this point. I'm seeing some real potentials. Sculpting away. Getting some Slack notifications in the background from work people that here it is, 10 o'clock on a Saturday or a Friday night. The weekend, we shouldn't be slacking each other, right? It's all good. People be loving their job, right? So I'm just not going to respond because it's not for me. It's a group Slack, and they don't need me right now. They don't realize that I got some sweet alien that ain't never been seen emerging here live, kind of for you all on the ZBrush. So just kind of looking over my model in different materials to get a feel for what it looks like. And honestly, depending on what your needs are, you know, if you're just like, hey, I got this sweet 3D printer, I wanted to create something real quick, print it out, and send it to the printer. But yeah, if you're just looking to 3D print something real quick, you know, this is there. This will do it. You know, obviously there's a ton more detail we could add if we want. It's up to you. I'm gonna, over here on the left, you got your little color finder. You can move that around and change the color, so you're not just dealing with materials down there, but you got colors to play with. Let's just say we're gonna 3D print this bust, but right now it's just some blob on the back, and what are we gonna do with that, right? Like, that's not gonna be super useful. So what if we do like we would with a bust that you find at some hobby shop, and clean it up a little bit. So I'm giving it an edge so it feels intentional, like it was cut off at a place that you might want. And again, I'm using dam standard, holding down Alt to go into additive mode, and then hold down Shift to smooth it. And then, you know, to make it so that it could stand up on its own, you've got to give it a little stand, okay? So let's, for that, add a new object or subtool. So if we go to the subtool panel over here in the right hand menu, subtool, subtool, you can see And before I get too far, I'm going to save this Joker. So save as alien bust. Save that. Okay. Yes, sir. All right. So, like I said, we're going to add a base to it. So, subtool mode over here on the right hand side. Let's go down to append. We're going to add a new layer. I'm going to go. We could do a cylinder. We could do a cube. I think I'm filling a cube. Throw that on there. You can see it's floating right over top of the head. Now, go to the right layer menu there, subtool menu. Click the cube so it's selected. And then we haven't used this yet, but the move tool. Like we used the move brush, but the move tool. Try next to draw mode. So grab the move tool. It gives us this gizmo to help us move it. We're going to grab the arrows to move it into place. Grab the little boxes to scale it in an individual axis. And as you're rotating, if you hold down shift, it'll snap to the orthographic views. So I'll say side, front, or you can click on this little head in the right hand corner. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it has to be mostly there, and yeah, it'll snap. Okay, so we're just intersecting this with our model. Scale it in. You know, we want it beefy enough to where it's going to support our model because it is a little front heavy. Okay, so if we were to print that just like it is, he's going to fall on his face. Okay, so we're going to duplicate this cube. You can hold down Control, grab the arrow, and drag it, and then it creates a new shape. It's kept it part of the same subtool. And I'm just scaling it around, filling it out, flattening it out. Give it a bit of a base and move it so it's under the head a little bit more centered. So now, if we were to print this boy out, he's not going to tip over. Okay. So there you go, rudimentary kind of base for your organic alien bust sculpt. Now you can see that the upper cube there is shaded, and that's because it's masked out so that we can just deal with the new shape that was created. But I want to treat them separately, so I'm going to split them apart. Over here in the subtool menu, I'm going to hit split, and we're going to split the unmasked points, and now it's created a new subtool and gotten rid of the mask. So now I can just work on one of those at a time. Alright, so you can sculpt on these, or you can use the what's called the Z modeler tool to work with poly by poly or edges, but that's a little bit more advanced, so we're not going to go there for this beginner lesson. So what can we do to still manipulate it in an interesting way? So we can use masking, okay? So if I hold down Control, over here on the left I get this mask pen. Okay, I'm keeping Control held down, and I'm going to click, instead of stroke, I'm going to do rectangle. Okay, so now when I hold down Control and draw a rectangle, it's going to mask that area. So we can see that the top of this base cube is masked, and it's a fairly sharp mask, but if I want it to be a little softer, I could, hit Control and click somewhere and it smooths it out a little bit. And then if I want to invert it, I can hold down Control and click outside, now it's inverted and everything else, except for the top, is there. Then if we grab our Move tool, and it's pretty much in the center, and we just like scale it in or out, it's giving us kind of a bevel look to our base. And then I can hold down Control and draw a rectangle outside to delete the mask. And there we go. We've got an alien bust. And I told you that I was going to replace these eyes because right now they're just sculpted in. And honestly, they turned out better than I thought they would. So I could keep it, but you know, man of my word, so we're gonna do this, okay? And this will give us the option to use yet another brush, okay? So it's called the Insert Mesh brush. So if we click on the brush icon in the top left and find Insert Mesh, IMM, there's several IMM brushes to insert all different kinds of pre-made stuff, but we're looking for the IMM primitives, which is right here. And there's different types of spheres. I'm going to go with the polysphere. Okay, so that's selected. And I'm just going to click on the model and drag it. And it throws a perfect polysphere on top of the mesh. Now those are some weird eyes. I'm going to click Move, and it grabs one of those copies, and I can, because everything else is masked, I'm just going to be controlling the eyes right now. And rather than moving it, I'm going to just go ahead and split it to a new, subtool layer, if you will. Okay, now move it back. We can stretch it. It's stretching weird. It's not doing what I would expect. So over here on the right, I'm going to hit Local Symmetry. And now, okay, I lied. Undo Dynamic. Freaking Dynamic. Okay, yeah. So now it's scaling more predictably. And I can grab my Move brush, kind of shape those eyes this way. You know, normally my eyes are perfect spheres, and so this method makes more sense. But, you know, I wouldn't make it hard on myself. So, okay, that's pretty good. It's really low resolution. But what we can do, go to Geometry, rather than just dynameshing it, we're going to just add more subdivisions. So we're going to divide it twice, and that's pretty high subdivision. Go back to Move. Maybe we want to rotate it a little bit until we get something that feels closer to what we had. And there you go. We've got eyes that are super sharp. You've got tight, crease edge that's happening as it intersects the head model, and it just looks cool, looks cooler. Let's go back into perspective mode, get a better feel for what this looks like for realsies, and I'm digging it. So at this point, you've got yourself a model that you could totally 3D print, and I'm forever noodling on this, but whatever. Impress all your friends, and if you want to see the process for taking a ZBrush model to 3D print, you just go ahead and watch my video on that, and it's going to be at the end of this video. Go ahead and click on that. So if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Let me know that you want a lot more on ZBrush, because You know what? Honestly, if I could spend every waking moment in ZBrush to serve my people, my creators out there in this world, I'd do it. Try me. I'm ready. I'm going to do this junk. Okay? So, you just see what you think about all that, and I'm rambling at this point. Okay, I'm going to call it. That, my friends, is good to go. So you might say, okay, that's great, let's save it. Again, you just hit save, it's going to save it over the previous file, or save it as a different type of file. ZPR, you want to do file save as alien bust. It'll say that we want to replace it. Yep, let's replace that because this is the one we want. And if you want to take this into a different application, over here in the top right you've got an export, and you can export it to OBJ or whatever. You may need to collapse all your subtools is what they call these, each individual piece, and you can do that with merge. And if you just said merge visible, you're like, wait, it didn't merge them, but actually it did. It just plopped it into a merged object up here. And so now you click on that, you can see here's our merged version. Export that, and you've got your alien bust finally ready to print or take into another application.